Hello, everybody, and welcome on the Carnivore Renaissance podcast. Today, I have the immense joy to have Mitchell Thompson. Mitchell, welcome.
Thank you for having me, my man. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so Mitchell has an amazing story of self-healing, we can say. So I'll let you introduce what happened to you and maybe just present the condition you suffered from for people who might not know exactly what it's about. And then we will go into more details.
Again, I appreciate you having me, Clement. It's good to be here. Yeah, so my name is Mitchell Thompson. I'm a personal trainer, health consultant, wellness professional. And, I've been helping people fix their health, fix their nutrition for a while now, for over 5 years. And last November, I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disorder that affects the intestines, namely the lower part of the small intestine going into the colon, going into the large intestine. It's essentially just my body has an allergic reaction anytime I eat certain foods that are quote unquote inflammatory for my immune system. So I was diagnosed last November. I went from 198 pounds to 153 pounds, lost
Wow.
over 45 pounds in less than a month. Yeah. And, the doctors told me that with something like Crohn's, there is no remedy for it other than putting me on immunosuppressant drugs, which is essentially a drug that'll lower my immune system. They said that diet really had nothing to do with my disorder. They said diet wouldn't really affect the overall disease itself. But when I followed their protocol and their program, it made me sicker. It made me a lot sicker following what they called the BRAT diet, which is bananas, rice, apples, and toast, which is all
Okay.
carbs, right? And it wasn't until I did my own due diligence, researching the implications of what a high ketogenic diet could do, let alone a carnivore diet. And once I started eating red meat, salt, and water, the old Anthony Chaffee protocol, I found myself relieving a lot of the symptoms within less than 2 weeks. So from there, I've been able to essentially put my Crohn's in full remission by adhering to a strict carnivore diet.
Mm. So, as a personal trainer for the last 5 years, during your training to become a trainer, what did you learn about nutrition?
Well, I've actually been a personal trainer since I was 17. So I've been a personal trainer for about 10 years. I've just been
Okay.
dabbling in
Sorry.
the nutritional health and
Okay.
wellness
Okay.
consulting side for the past 5. So
So 10 years ago, what did you learn about
right,
nutrition?
exactly. Yeah, but that's even worse. It's even worse that you add 5 years to it because 10 years ago, I hadn't even considered the implications of nutrition on gains, we'll say, in the gym. I had clients when I was 18, 19 years old that lost over 100 pounds, over 120 pounds. And it was strictly through caloric restriction, really avoiding certain foods. I didn't know it at the time. I thought it was caloric restriction. But it was through the most rudimentary approach from a nutrition side. There was nothing intentional on the nutrition side when I was helping my clients before I started learning about the implication of nutrition. So yeah, as a personal trainer, I mean, you know this, most personal trainers get away with their genes and their natural genetics. They get away with how they look and they propagate that as if others can achieve that same sort of outcome just based off how they look. And most personal trainers don't have to know about nutrition so long they have their client do the bare minimum.
Hmm. Yeah, I might add something as I've been a trainer for 15 years as well. And I think a lot of trainers start young when the metabolic dysfunction is not actively, showing its face. So sometimes it's easy to think, well, I'm doing this, it's working, so why it's not working for my clients as well. And a lot of trainers as well stop before the age that the metabolic dysfunction will occur.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a tricky, you know, like time range that has to be taken under consideration when trainers are speaking out about nutrition or the SICO and this kind of things, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even really consider that most of those trainers don't train long enough for the implications of their bad dietary habits to catch up with them.
Mm. Well, I started when I was 22 and I'm 38 now, but I look around from the trainers I knew back then, not many of them are still in the business.
Right.
So, you know, that's the point.
The question is
Uh,
why, and it's because they worry more about the fitness than they do the nutrition and the metabolism.
oh no, not that they just left the business in the point
Why do you think
that
that is, though? Do you think it had to do with the fact of them not having their clients get the results that they thought they could give them?
mm, I think, at least in from what I've seen in Europe, especially in Switzerland, I would say most of them are not passionate about people.
Mm,
Most of them are passionate about either sports, like performance, but they're in the wrong business because if you're really passionate about performance, you should work with elite athletes, in my opinion. But then if you work with the general population, maybe at some point you get bored because yeah, you can pretend, use words and stuff, but at the end of the day, uh, you won't achieve like through your clients any kind of significant performances.
right.
That's one point. And the other point, in my opinion, is that sometimes some clients, they see some trainers, sorry, they are seeing their clients having a lot of money, doing good in different kind of business, finance, like trade or whatever. And I think, oh, I'm not doing because it's difficult to be a successful trainer when it comes to financial aspect. So a lot of them, they sometimes they struggle, and then they look at their clients and they say, well, maybe there's more money to make there. So they're not passionate about helping people. They're not coming into the business for and only helping people. And I think if you are really looking for ways to help people the best you can, that's when you become successful. That's, yeah, my
Is that why you think
conclusion.
you've been doing it past what most personal trainers give up on? Like, especially like you said, once they hit their 30s, usually it gets to the point where they start start exploring different career paths at least. Would you say that's why you've stuck with it, is because you have that passion to actually help the individual?
Yeah, I've never looked at the job as a through the financial lens, I would
Right.
say. To me, after 7, 8 years, I wanted to learn more, so I went back to school studying anthropology because it was a way to understanding human beings better. Then I got into Thai massage therapy and now into nutrition. So I was adding something to help people with a new tool. Um, but I think you have to have this drive to. I even went to work in a retirement home for a year as an experiment, just to learn practically how to work with older people. Like when I say older, I'm talking about 80,
Mm-hmm.
85, 90, 95 years old. How do you work physically with this kind of population? So I went
Right.
to work for a year just as a training. And I already had more than 10 years as a personal trainer at the time. So it's about experimenting things, I think.
What do you
But
think
it,
is the biggest? Sorry, go ahead.
but again, I think it's a business that is not easy, and many people might think, "Oh, I'm just have a nice body, so I'm gonna get client." But the fact is that first of all, if you train athletes, athletes don't care how you look. What they care is can you make them win the gold medal. Like if you look at Usain Bolt and his trainer, Glenn Mills. Glenn Mills is not the most athletic guy, right? But
Mm-hmm.
he had a guy who dominated the whole sprinting world for 8 long years. The single guy who beat him was his teammate, who was trained by the
Right.
same guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you uh, train the general population, people mostly want to be understood and listened. Of course, you don't want to be obese and say, oh, you know, you need to lose some fat and yourself are obese.
Right.
No, there is of course a balance in that. But I think I've seen many trainers focused on them only, and it's not
Yeah, my
about
question
that.
is, do you have a so I tell my clients all the time that I look at nutrition with regards to like a ratio distribution. I look at nutrition as 80% of the reason that they'll get healthier, and fitness is only 20%. Where
Yeah,
would you classify that distribution in terms of working out versus eating right?
for a long time, I've done a lot of endurance sports myself. My dad was an elite runner, marathon, so I was never gaining any weight. I thought I had a fast metabolism.
Hmm.
That's what I was told.
Hmm.
And so until my 34th year, I didn't gain any weight. So I was just propagating the same stupidity. Yeah, calories in, calories out. It's about a balance. It's about what you put in and what you put out.
Hmm.
And I could not imagine that was wrong because that's what I was doing. And one day
Yeah,
it stopped because I reached 35 years old and I started to eat this Kellogg cereal since I was 5 years old. I started to eat a lot of pasta, rice, carbs all my
hmm,
life. And that's about a 30 years period of time being exposed
right.
to a high carb intake, which will at some point
Well,
make me
isn't the diet? Wouldn't you say the carbs in Europe and in Switzerland are different than the carbs in America? Wouldn't you? Aren't the because I mean, what is your guys's? You guys have a lot stricter regulations on like seed oils and specific additives and preservatives, don't you?
Yeah, maybe the wheat. I don't know. I'm not a chemist
Right,
guy, but at the end of the day, it will turn into glucose into your blood.
right.
You will have this insulin spike again and
Hmm.
again, every day, a few times a day, to an abnormal rate. And at some point, maybe if I would have lived in the US, it would have taken me maybe 20 years. Maybe in
Right.
Europe,
Exactly.
because of how it's made, I don't know. Maybe
Right.
that's the reason. Or maybe, I don't know. It took me
Yeah. See
30
those.
years.
Yeah, those are the
So,
questions that I wonder as an American with regards to like me eating Kellogg's, me eating Frosted Flakes, me eating all this BS for most of my life. I wonder the downstream implications of the specific ingredients we use that have been disbanded in Europe. But I don't know specifically what countries
well,
are disbanding what chemicals, so it's hard for me to even propose that as a potential implicating factor.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But to
Okay.
answer your question, I went to the gym, training 2 hours every day for 5 months. And initially, I thought, okay, a month and a half would be enough. I will lose this extra 8 kilos of fat that I gained over the last 2 years because I wasn't training much. And after a month and a half, it did not happen. Body composition was still the same. So 3 months later, still the same. 5 months later, still the same. And then I understood that, okay, then training is not enough. Training does not work. Huh. That was a slap in the face because I would look at clients with a condescending kind of attitude like, yeah, the guy is bullshitting me. He's just saying he's doing this, he's doing that. He went for his walks and blah, 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 but he didn't. There's no way. I'm going 2 hours every day, killing myself in the gym.
And
Doesn't
getting
work.
nothing.
So anyway, then I understood through, Paul Mason, Anthony Chaffee, and other doctors like Gary Fetke as well.
Hmm.
Um, they spoke about the implication of how sugar, fructose can, like fucks up your system basically.
Hmm.
And then I understood, so I changed the experiment. I said no more gym, no more caloric expenditure, and no more sugar. And let's see. who's right, who's wrong. And a month and a half later, I was down 3.5 kilos of body fat, I think.
Yes.
Then I went quickly into carnivore, and for a year and a half now, almost 2 years. Yeah.
So you've been on
So
carnivore for the past 2 years almost.
almost, yeah,
Nice. How do
in
you feel? I mean, is it
right?
because I'm right now? I'm only about 5 months in. I'm only about 5 months, and I feel
Yeah,
better than ever.
yeah, and that's the point. I hear so many trainers saying, "Yeah, I've tried this for 3 months," and they just praising the thing. They exactly say the same thing that you said. I've felt better than ever,
Hmm.
but the social aspect of it, and at some point I'm like, well, you're saying you felt great, but the social, what is social aspect of it? It's like someone giving you poison and you saying, "Oh yeah, I'll take your poison because you're my friend." I mean, I don't know. It's not me.
Yeah, I hear you. I wrote in this book. I wrote a chapter called "Savoring Social Situations" and essentially how to navigate around dining out. And the hardest part for every single client that I've consulted, namely on the nutritional side, the past 5 years, their biggest issue has been overcoming that peer pressure of maintaining a strict adherence to their diet when they're out socializing. And the question is, for a lot of my clients, how are you actually seeing that lifestyle change in the face of those social peer pressure moments? How are you able to say no, I don't want alcohol, but still be able to be around people if they're casually drinking? How are you able to say I'm okay, I don't need any bread or any of these chips and salsa if you're out eating, I'll just wait for my meal to come in? I'll go to a restaurant every week when me and my girlfriend will eat with her dad. We'll go every single week to some place that is going to be barbecue, that's going to be just carb dense
Ah,
with some meat. And so what I do is I'll get a double cheeseburger essentially and just take off the buns. Order
yeah,
two more patties, get a fork and a knife and eat it like it's nothing. And for them at first it was a social abnormality for them to see that. But now that I've done it regularly enough, it's just a normal thing, no different than if I ordered a beer or if I ordered
yeah.
an alcohol of some kind.
And again, I mean, if we look at things, I mean, nutrition is about health in the first plan. But I think the fitness got lost into this weight loss thing. You got to move in order to lose weight, meaning fat. Okay. So now trainers, and a lot of them come from the bodybuilding area, not anymore, but back in the 2000 it was the case. Uh,
I'd say a lot of them still do. They come from that
yeah, still,
hypertrophy,
yeah,
muscle growth.
still,
Yeah.
but it's still more open compared to 20 or 25 years
Oh,
ago
for sure. For sure.
because the business has changed and but it's still the weight loss thing. So people go and sign up a membership in a gym to lose weight. And then the trainers come to talk about nutrition in that direction, losing
Right.
weight. So it becomes the only focus. So I think that this, if you look at nutrition on the health basis, who gives a shit about what your neighbor or what your friend think about? If you yourself is strongly convinced that this is the right thing because you have studied it and you have experimented it, you've experimented a improvement in many things. So whoever thinks whatever doesn't matter if it's your health.
Yeah, I have
And
clients that every single sorry, go ahead.
no, and that's what the people forget. It's about their health. And then
Right.
they get stuck into this, oh yeah, you don't drink alcohol? No. So if you go to, let's say, a dinner and you say, I had addiction issues with alcohol, so I'm not drinking anymore. I'm ready to bet a lot of money that nobody will challenge you to keep drinking and say, oh man, come on, yeah, that's just a drink. No, because people, when you talk about addiction, like a medical condition, people respect usually. But then you come and say, "Oh, no, I'm not drinking tonight." What? And then that's when they start to, challenge you. Come on,
Right.
man. Come on, what are you doing? These kind of things. But as long as you bring a medical excuse, everybody shuts up.
Man, my girlfriend, like I said, her family is first generation Sicilian, meaning her grandparents are from Sicily. And every Sunday we have Sunday dinner, and it's traditional Sicilian meals with nothing but carbs, gluten, grains, pasta, all this stuff. And at first, I indulged a lot of the times pre-Crohn's for the sake of maintaining that familial integration so I could integrate myself into the family without seeming like an outcast. A fancy way of saying I gave into the peer pressure. But once I got hit with Crohn's and I adopted a strict carnivore diet, I'll never forget Thanksgiving. I could only eat essentially the turkey that they had, and they tried to get me to eat some mashed potatoes. And so for me, it was like, all right, this one time I'll give in because they don't know what Crohn's disease is. They don't know what these autoimmune disorders really are. They're from a small city in Sicily, and I'll never forget. I got really sick from eating those potatoes on Thanksgiving, and then every Sunday dinner after that, I flat out stuck with my guns, using the medical condition
Yeah.
as the justification for why I was avoiding certain foods, namely all the carbs that they were throwing in.
And again, I mean, the medical condition is not a lie. If you overdo certain things, you might expose yourself to certain conditions. And as you don't want that to happen, you do not take these things. It's very simple. But I don't know what's wrong with the carnivore thing, because people are very keen to make a special recipe for someone who's vegan or
Right.
vegetarian. That seems to be very fine. And they say, "Oh, we made that for you because we know you don't eat any meat." But a meat eater or a carnivore dieter doesn't take anything away from anybody. Just says, "I'm just going to eat the meat."
I think it's the day and age it's the day and age that we live in, though. I mean, you're familiar with how saturated fat got bastardized in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, correct? Like you're familiar with that whole process, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's like when you understand, especially in America, that demonization of saturated fats to justify the overproduction and selling of carbs makes you understand why everything's low fat, why everything is specialized with these ingredients that are all on the carb side.
yeah,
And I think it's just we haven't had enough time, like vegans and vegetarians have, to have that calibration be a normal thing. I don't think we've had enough time at this point because of how new a lot of these carnivore approaches are, or these low carb approaches are. Because I have clients that they can't even fathom the idea of only eating meat. So I tell them, just go on a ketogenic diet then, go on a low carb diet. Because
yeah.
at the end of the day, it's limiting the overall carb intake, which is going to limit your overall insulin production. Because right now, I'm willing to bet you have an overproduction of both the insulin and all the negative downstream effects that the glucose is going to cause,
Yeah.
namely the adipose tissue that's building on your body that you think is caused from fat.
But if you look at how much beneficial things that a fitness routine or workout training can bring to people, you know, like mental health, muscular development. And it seems that still people focus on the weight loss, where the weight loss is 90% due, 95% due to nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but but still, trainers are selling the programs for weight loss.
Yeah, I think
So
it's again because they're able to live off of their own genetics. They're able to live off of, look at me, I'm not overweight, I'm not out of shape, and so if you follow my program, you can look like me. And
yeah,
I let me ask you this, Clement, because this is what I believe. I believe the vast majority of personal trainers are some of the laziest people on earth.
well, what do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's almost contradictory, right? How can you be a personal trainer and
No,
be
no, no.
lazy?
I want to make sure that I understand well.
Perfect. So I believe that it's truly that they're able to. I'll be the prime example. I was interested in learning about muscular stability, muscular endurance, hypertrophy, power, strength. Like I was interested in the processes that get you to your most athletic self, we'll say. And again, like you said earlier, it's more performance that most athletes go into without knowing it or not. I'm now more in the guideline of longevity, which you can't really have both. It's either performance or it's longevity. You can't really have both. And so I was more aware when I was coming across other personal trainers, the limitations of their knowledge in the fitness industry itself, in kinesiology itself. Like if I said the word hypertrophy, they didn't even know what it meant. If I
Hmm.
if I said the word sarcopenia, they didn't know what it meant. And so I'm like, how are you a personal trainer for 5, 10 years at this point? Yet you don't know these basic concepts. Oh, it's because you've looked this way for so long. You've been able to promote that your programs will get people to look the way you look without having to go into the weeds of the actual reasons why that transformation will happen. And so they
Yeah.
live off their genetics. They live off of just their blessed predispositions rather than having to garner the knowledge to help out any individual, not just somebody who has blessed genetics like they have.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the guy who sold the most session, the guy I've seen who sold the most numbers of session in a gym, didn't even have a certificate for training. He got hired lying to the gym manager saying, "Oh, the company that I did my training did not send me the certificate, but I can start this week and I go next week in this city and I get it. I go to their office." He started, he sold 40 sessions the first week, and the gym was very happy, and he never got any certificate. And he worked there for 10 months. The guy was, I think he was probably using drugs, like sometimes big, sometimes smaller, sometimes big, sometimes. Anyway, packing his schedule the whole day from 8 until 9 p.m., 8 a.m., 9 p.m.,
Mhm.
1 hour break. The guy was on cocaine. He was selling cocaine to clients, and still the gym was very happy.
It's because he was able to sell quotas and maintain
Yeah,
quotas.
yeah, and the guy was kind of, yeah, he was a bit bulky, but he was lying. He said he was a world championship kickboxing, and he would say anything. He was a nutritionist. One guy came one day, he was not here, and the person said, "Oh, that's this guy. Um, the sports doctor is here." And I look at, I said, "What? What sport doctor?" He was like, "Yeah, he's a sport doctor." I'm like, "Talk about this guy with this name, this family name." It's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Wow, crazy." So again, lazy, I don't know. Some trained, some don't. For my part, if I have to speak for myself, I did triathlon, track and field a lot. I competed since I was very young. So at some point, I don't feel this, need to train because I already killed myself when I was younger.
Mhm.
So I'm not into showing what I can do or handstand or these kind of things. I don't really
Right.
care because I know what I've accomplished to the level I've accomplished.
Yeah. So when I say lazy, that's really what I mean. It's they're intellectually lazy more than
Oh,
anything.
well.
Yeah.
Well, the
Yeah.
problem is it doesn't require much to be a trainer, to be honest.
Right.
I mean, you get a 3-month certificate, and then you get this personal training um, license, and you
Clement, most
can,
people don't realize kinesiology is only 150 years old. Like it's not even that old. And so the the bare minimum requirements of understanding how the human body works for me is so minimum that when a personal trainer doesn't know what hypertrophy is or what sarcopenia is, for me it's like you're beyond you're beyond intellectually lazy to the point where you couldn't even read the first 5 pages of your certification book.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I got in 2008 the ACE personal training
Hmm.
certificate,
Yeah, mine's through
and
NASM. I did the National Academy of Sports Medicine, which I think is an American specific base.
yeah. But at the time, for me as French, I thought, oh, this must be very, strong as a training and stuff. I got a book, fly cards. I don't remember if I had DVDs or not, but anyway. And then at some point, I went to see my friend James Everett in San Francisco. He's been a trainer for 30 years as well. He knew the previous era of fitness. He was a 2 times national champion for step, and then he was a Reebok presenter for 2 years all around the world. And then I went to LA and I went to this computer center testing. I got 4 hours to do the test. I did it. I was a foreigner. My English was not so good at the time. I got an 86% correct answers, and I got my card.
Hmm.
I've never met anyone. They had this kind of workshop, where you could meet people, but I didn't have any one single meetup with an actual person. It was just theoretical. And in France, I had a 1 year program, full time, 600 hours theory and 600 hours practice
Hmm.
on the group class, on the gym. So it was a little bit more complete. But anyway, so that's the issue, in my opinion, in the whole
Yeah.
fitness field, is the how easy it is for people to become a trainer without any.
The barrier of
Yeah,
entry is so low.
yeah. I mean, the
Yeah.
guy is like, he sees something, he says, I want to change job. I got a bit of biceps.
Hmm.
I was painting buildings, but now I'm going to be a trainer. And there's nothing wrong in changing your life, changing job. If you want to do something, that's great. But you need to invest everything and put your soul in it. And as you say, don't be lazy. You want to change? Okay, become a trainer, even if you're 35 years old. But try to be the best in it.
Put in that work. Make sure that you're putting in the man hours to be qualified to start embarking in that industry.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
So just back to your Crohn disease. So when you started to go to see these doctors, um, have you made some research on the Crohn disease, or did you expect them to give you the best, options? Did you go there
Were you able to?
naive?
Yeah. So, I don't know if you were able to take a look at the whole documentary or not, but I made a
Yeah, I
documentary.
watched it. I watched it. Yeah,
So, you remember how those GI specialists were,
yeah,
how
but
they were essentially. Go
that's
ahead.
where I want to go. But first, I wanted to know, when you went to see them,
Right.
how, I mean, what was your psychology at the time?
Hmm.
Were you already, a bit skeptical from what they would tell you, or were you just open to listen to them?
Great question. And the way I approach those doctors in the documentary is indicative of the trust and faith that I had in them going into it. So
Hmm.
I was a firm believer that these medical doctors, at bare minimum, have to have enough knowledge on, especially if they're GI specialists, like they should have enough knowledge on how the digestive system even works, let alone how our body metabolizes food to make it into energy, and all of the downstream diseases that stem from that metabolic dysfunction. Like I was aware of metabolic dysfunction. I was aware of autoimmune disorders. My girlfriend has had celiac before I had Crohn's
Hmm.
disease. So I was hyper aware of the implications of a autoimmune disorder on the body, but I wasn't privy to the approaches of remedying them. So like for my girlfriend, I knew that she had to avoid gluten. Boom, clear remedy. She doesn't need medicine for it. So when I was going in, I had that same expectation. They're going to tell me what foods I'm not supposed to eat. They're going to tell me if there is medicine, how I should be on a specific medicine for a short enough period of time to eventually heal my body enough to get me back to a normal state. Like I had those sort of expectations going in. because I had never experienced the medical industry that directly until that moment. Meaning I went to the hospital for like stitches, I went to the hospital for like sprained ankle, stuff like that, but never for anything metabolically related. Nothing ever like that serious. So yeah, I went in thinking these I hesitate to call them experts, but I went in with the expectation that these experts were going to be able to guide me down the route that I eventually went down, which was calibrating my nutrition in a way to ease my digestive tract, to ease the overall symptoms of the Crohn's. But as you saw in the documentary, I got the exact opposite.
Were you confused, or did you quickly understood what was going on?
Oh no, I was so confused that I even followed their protocol for the first 2 weeks under the assumption that they had my best interests in mind. And I've already, by the way, this book was already published by the time I had Crohn's. So I knew all about digestion, basic nutrition, all this stuff. And so it made me almost feel insane, Clement. I'm sitting there thinking like, there's no way they're telling me diet has nothing to do with what I'm experiencing. I know that it has to, but they have a white lab coat. They have MD next to their name. Maybe they're right. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with it. And I started going down this uncertainty path where I legit was questioning everything I'd learned up to that point until they doubled down on the we need to get you on medicine. And when they kept doubling down on saying I need to be on medicine, I need to be on medicine, that's when red flags started to pop up. But it wasn't enough for me to not embark on their protocol initially, which I did. They were saying medicine is what you're going to need to be on. Red flags. You're going to need to not worry about certain foods. If anything, just eat these foods because they're going to be better for you. And they told me to go on a high fiber diet, which is the worst thing you can do if you got Crohn's. So I did that. And I realized early on when I wasn't getting symptom relief that maybe they didn't know what they were talking about. And it gave me more security on the initial hesitations I had when they were trying to tell me that diet, nutrition had nothing to do with my disorder, let alone remedying the symptoms that I was experiencing.
Yeah. But I think the way you did it and you recorded, and I encourage everybody to look at the documentary that we will, communicate the link in the description. The way you recorded these interviews with these specialists, and it seems so difficult for them to be humble and to say, maybe there's something I don't know. Just to say, I don't know. Even if you can show them wrong, they will still tell you, no, I'm right.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where I couldn't believe. Like, I had so many people telling me to go back. Like, go back and tell these doctors how you're in remission. Go back and throw it in their face how you knew what you were talking about the whole time and they were wrong. But Clement, let's be honest. If I go there, they're going to say, oh, you're an N equals 1. You're an anecdote. It doesn't count. We can't extrapolate off your singular experience to a mass population because we don't have the studies to substantiate it. And they'll go down this avenue of you're a specific special case and we can't extrapolate from your specialness to a generalized population. And so I was like, there's no point in trying to convince these doctors. They're already stuck in their ways and you can hear it through the recording from the conversation.
I would still make probably a picture of, if I was you, I would make a picture of myself and send them saying, titled, your N equals 1 proven wrong.
I like that.
Something like that. Because I get your point, but at the same time, if all of these N equals 1, never tell them they were wrong 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, they would be legitimate to think that they're right.
But exactly. That's why I don't think there's any necessary actions on my end to try to convince them, because they've been GI specialists for how many years now?
Well,
and I don't think anything can really change their mind at this point.
Again, it's not about convincing them. It's about telling them what you told me was wrong. I healed myself. And what I did that you did not approve, that you thought was not working, did work. You are wrong on this case. Period.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll never forget going into both. They were two independent GI specialists. So when I went into each of their offices respectively, I'll never forget seeing these. They had to be at least in their 60s, but like these 60, 70-year-old ladies that were getting Entyvio injected in their arm as I'm walking in there. And I'm just like, I'm disheartened at the idea of how many people they have led astray by ignoring, let alone denouncing, the lifestyle changes in the overall putting their Crohn's or their autoimmune disorder in remission.
Well, lifestyle doesn't bring any money.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
so
you can't have your insurance pay for lifestyle.
how did you, because you went back into your initial weight quite quickly, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Was 3 months, 4 months?
4 months.
That's quite quick.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I drank a lot of raw milk, so the putting on the weight was more so for the documentary to say that I put on the weight again. But it wasn't the healthiest getting back to 198 that fast. I drank a lot of raw milk once I realized I could tolerate it. And so all of my clients who have made that same, they postulated that same idea, like, how did you put on that weight that fast? Man, I'm 150. I want to put on that weight. I'm like, slow down. It was mainly a camera trick for the sake of me being able to expedite the documentary because it wasn't the healthiest, we'll say 45 pounds I put back on. I would say if I did it the healthiest way by not consuming the raw milk, it would have probably taken me 6 to 7 months rather than 4. Because I accumulated probably 5% extra body fat from just the raw milk itself, which I don't recommend to anybody if they're trying to get healthier, let alone if they're trying to put on weight the right way. But that's a little documentary inside secret. So,
Okay, cool. uh, so at this time, right now, how do you eat? How did you stabilize your nutrition based on the Crohn's disease condition?
So with Crohn's in particular, there's no set food list. They say everybody has genetic heterogeneity in their body's response to certain foods. So that's why they dismiss food completely. So what I did is I stuck to a strict carnivore diet at first. I started getting into the ketovore side of it when I introduced almond butter. So almond butter was a staple for me for a long time. And now, like I said, I also had raw milk in there. I ate a lot of cheese and butter as well. Now I've kind of taken a step back from the raw milk. So I haven't consumed raw milk probably for a month and a half, maybe 2 months at this point. But I still eat a lot of cheese. I eat a lot of, I'll throw in yogurt every now and then, but I primarily stick with ground beef, steak, sausage, bacon, and I do deli lunch meats every now and then, like smoked turkey, stuff like that. And I put the bacon, like I don't even really eat chicken like that, but I'll put the bacon and the lunch meats at the lower end of the totem pole, which means I don't eat them as frequently as I eat my ruminant meats, which is going to be my ground beef, my ground bison. I have a steak every single day, sometimes more than one, usually between 12 and 16 ounces. Eggs, I wasn't able to eat eggs until a month ago. So now I'm back to eating eggs, which is a huge game changer for me because I missed eggs for the longest. So as for now, my base diet has been stabilized by decreasing the dairy and increasing my egg consumption overall, which is essentially how I maintain my dietary discipline currently and what I've been doing the past month and a half, 2 months.
Was it one element that you reintroduced and you felt that, okay, this doesn't work?
Yeah, eggs were the first one. I introduced eggs early on the carnivore diet, and I was having a severe allergic reaction. And I looked online. Some people said it's the yolk. Some people said it's the egg white protein itself. So I experimented with both. I did just egg whites and then I did just yolks. And both of them continued to make me sick. And I think it was a result of my intestines not being as healed as they got to be once I was able to reintroduce them back, which I was able to do a month ago, which I now have a completely tolerant reaction to them, which is why they're such a staple.
So from going from a 10 years personal trainer, even if you were, let's say, aware about the food and the nutrition, to going through this Crohn disease, losing all this weight, and going through this process through the medical establishment, medications and stuff. And now being where you are, what did you learn as a personal lesson?
Well, the personal lesson's pretty obvious. It's if you don't take care of your dietary food intake, you have no idea what your immune system may do, let alone turn on you the way mine did during the Crohn's. But yeah, I was like you said, I was a personal trainer for 10 years. I knew about nutrition for, we'll say, 10, 12-ish years in total, but really only the past 5, 6 years when I doubled down on it. And during that process, I'm learning things like maybe rice isn't that good for you. Maybe whole grains aren't that good for you. What are lectins? What's phytic acid? What's oxalic acid? Like, I'd learned these things, but I didn't weigh the implication of those negative things on the human body the way that I did once I had to avoid them when I had Crohn's. So it solidified to me concepts I had in my mind. Like, I knew saturated fat wasn't bad for you, but I didn't know why. I knew LDL cholesterol was the actual catalyst to causing cardiovascular disease, but that's as far as I knew. I didn't know the difference between oxidized LDL. I didn't know about thrombogenesis and how linoleic acid is the specific catalyst to causing that downstream effect of cardiovascular disease. Like, I didn't know any of that. So when I had Crohn's smack me in the face where I was bedridden for like a month, 2 months on end, it gave me nothing but time to double down on the minutia of the research that I had an idea of, but I wasn't bought into. And through the Crohn's experience, I started experimenting with how true are these concepts? Like, all right, Anthony Chafee, how true is eating only red meat, salt, and water, realizing I'm now energy deficient because I don't have enough fat, so now I can slowly add in butter and cheese. How will that really fix my energy levels? How will that really fix my metabolism overall if I follow that? And so when I experiment with that, I end up realizing, okay, here's the low energy phase. Now let's do the things that I'm being told. Let's now introduce the butter. Let's introduce fattier cuts of meat. And by trusting that process and actually knowing the minutia of the science underlying those processes, it made me double down on what I now essentially live in and live by, which is low carb is what humans have evolved to eat, and have essentially our entire digestive tract has stemmed from a high fat, high protein diet, and carbs in any sense has been recently introduced as a way of compensating when we don't have that high fat and high protein. Meaning, I tell my clients, starving sucks. Eating carbs is better than starving, but eating high fat, high protein is the best way of eating. So that's kind of where I've deduced my way of thinking from not really committing to that pre-Crohn's to now doubling down on it post-Crohn's.
Okay. Did you have any colleagues, like trainers, who got interested into your story and got something out of it?
Yeah, I think trainers and colleagues less than I did people who have autoimmune disorders, namely Crohn's, who messaged me and said, I've never felt so reassured that I was actually gaslit by the doctors who were telling me the same thing they told you. So a lot of random people, ever since seeing the documentary, have reached out and saying how it's confirmed to them that they're not crazy. But as for any colleagues of mine, they've more doubled down on the, okay, how can I tell my clients red meat actually isn't bad for them? How can I tell my clients that a high-fat diet isn't going to make them fat? And so I essentially will take those trainers on as my own clients to essentially educate them on the gaps in their knowledge to make them more sufficient when going back to their own clients.
Okay, but do they apply it themselves?
Who knows? I have no idea. I just know that they come to see me, they end up becoming one of my clients, and then after they leave me because they think they know enough, I have no idea. Because at the end of the day, you know it, having behavioral changes in a client takes time. And when you have a client that, I have multiple clients at this point, but my first client was my first vegetarian client was 2 years ago. And it took me through the Crohn's to get them to introduce red meat because I didn't think it was that big of a deal when I wasn't as aware of dietary factors like saturated fat, and all, like the implications of what I now know on saturated fat, LDL, linoleic acid, all this stuff. So I wasn't in a position before to instill those behavioral changes into my vegetarian clients. But at this point, I've been able to do it and I've seen them implement it. I have one client after 2 weeks of talking with him about, which is 4 sessions, 2 sessions a week, after talking with him about what introducing red meat will really do for him. He said, man, I had a steak for the first time in 8 years and I thought I was going to hate it, but man, I enjoyed every bite of it. And so from that point, it's saying, can you sustain that behavior for an extended period of time to then get the change from it? So even a month in of having my vegetarian client double down on this behavioral change, I can't really notice a difference yet because we haven't got his blood panel. I haven't really measured his BMI yet. I haven't had him do an in-body scan. So it's too early for me to even tell, let alone to tell if my colleagues have implemented it and seen change in their clients. So I would like to hope so, but unless he is explicit about the difference in his clients' change, it's hard for me to even gauge whether or not they've instilled it into their clients. But at least they now know better. And that's all I care about.
I think you said something very important. The time that it takes for regular people to change behaviors when it comes to training habits, nutrition. They do listen to you as a trainer. They do look at you as an example or role model sometimes, but they know they cannot do what you do. But if you're patient enough, it might take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but you can see in it sometime amazing evolution of someone. But I think that's something that many trainers don't get as well. It's this kind of time range that it takes for someone to accept that this is another road I'm going to take.
It's a lifestyle change, truly. And that's why when you've been conditioned for 20, 30, 40, 50, I have clients in their 60s that they only know one way of approaching their lifestyle. You have to uncondition all of those bad behaviors and then recondition them almost like you would condition a child. So you have to uncondition 30, 40, 50 years worth of behaviors, get them to square one, and then start reconditioning these newfound perspectives. And that takes time.
Yeah, but in perspective, it's not so long.
Oh, no, it takes 6 months compared to 40 years. 6 months compared to 40 years. I have clients that in 3 months, I've had clients in a few weeks maintain the behavioral change. It's at that point, I can't measure if it's sustainable or not. But in order to, and that's why my company's called Self-Sustained Training, is because I try to teach people to sustain the changes that I teach them, which is the biggest thing most trainers can't do, is having their clients sustain those lifestyle changes.
Yeah. I see. My approach is different. I would probably be less pushy at the beginning and let them get slowly and slowly so it stays. So whatever they get, even if it doesn't take 3 months, but maybe 9, I'm sure it's forever. See?
Yeah,
So
reel them in with a little, you just reel them in to make sure that they have the interest. And you can't really get them successful unless they've shown that they're interested in making the change.
I have a client, he's a doctor, he's a specialist. And we've been talking about the carnivore diet when I started it. And he was listening to me as just listening. Maybe at the time he was probably thinking, okay, this is a bit eccentric. But he wouldn't say anything, I respect. And more I got into studying this field and the physiology behind it. And I think I was telling him at some point, you should do a bit of ketogenic for a month because he wouldn't lose his belly fat, even though he was training twice a week. So, and a year and a half later, I received a text with a picture, and it was a plate with 2 sausage, 2 eggs, and 2 steak. And he said, "Oh, I started the keto diet." And I said, "This is not keto, this is carnivore." But just all of a sudden, and it's been 2 months and a half now he's been doing it, like pure carnivore, 1 meal a day. He transitioned like this,
Whole
but,
body composition.
but for the whole year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
he was like,
Nothing.
yeah, you're right. But it wouldn't change anything. So you never know when it comes. Some
Mm-hmm.
people it's more step by step,
Mm-hmm.
and some people one day they just wake up and they say, okay, I've heard enough of this, I'm going to try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's variable with the time it takes for people to actually commit. But as long as you can provide them with enough information, eventually the truth will set them free in the sense that they'll start embarking on the things that you tried to get them to commit to in the first place. And as long as at some point they find themselves committing to, at least, if they can find themselves fully committing to what you are at least trying to prescribe to them, they can then measure whether or not it was actually effective because they were able to fully commit to it. And most people
Yeah.
don't see the benefits because they don't fully commit to it.
Yeah, I mean, again, back to what we said earlier. If you train an elite athlete, the average age would be between 18 years old and 25 years old as an average. Um, the chances that this person has inflammation, metabolic inflammation, is very low, even though they create it through the intense training. The injuries, they may happen, they do happen, but when we talk about elite athletes, they don't happen so often. So you kind of work with someone who's new from a physical standpoint. And that athlete is usually focused into one competition for the next 3 months or the next 6 months or next year. So their training and all their lives is turned into one single goal or date, or event. But then when you train someone who's 45, 50 years old, has 3 kids, one is not doing good at school, the couple is not doing good, the marriage or whatever, at work, the guy is getting more responsibilities. I mean, and then you come on top of that. Do you come first as a window of air that person can breathe, or do you come as another stress?
Right.
And I got to realize at some point that I came in the fitness with my, competition mindset. Oh, I need to get result, and this client, he needs to get result, otherwise it means that I'm sucks. But I had to learn that for most people at the beginning, depending who, but most people are living very stressful lives. So I guess for the first 6 months or a year, you would be a window of air of I can breathe.
Right.
And then when they got enough air, then they can start to put a little bit more pressure on whatever you ask them to do.
Yeah, I literally call it, I tell my clients all the time, I'm just holding your hand until you can ride the bike yourself. And
Yeah.
I'm here as like you said, as a relief. I'm here as a burden relief for you to not have to worry about, how do I get healthy? What food do I buy? How much food do I eat? When do I eat certain foods? It's like, don't worry about any of that. I'll take care of that for you until you learn what I'm doing, until you then understand what I'm doing, so you can start implementing it yourself to where you're truly sustained in the overall training that you've been dispensed. And it starts with taking every individual with wherever they're at. Because if I have a 17-year-old kid who's just trying to gain weight and gain muscle because he's wanting to be a gym bro, versus a 55-year-old lawyer who has 5 kids and their husband also works, so they're both hardly ever home. It's like, those are 2 completely different scenarios in
Yeah.
how I'll not only dispense the information, but the expectations that I have in getting them to a point of self-sustainability.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think these things are not taught into the training for trainers.
At all. No way. They're not even, like I said, if they're not even reading what hypertrophy and sarcopenia are, there's no way they're going to learn about the tender love and care you have to give the individual client.
Yeah, I mean, but so how do you look at your field now, and do you see fitness as a prevention for future issues, or do you see fitness as a part of it, also as a cure?
Yeah, I believe fitness is a big part of the cure and the continuation of maintaining the overall healthy lifestyle. Strength training is crucial. People have got to just endure more. They have to have their muscles undergo more just strengthening. And like you said earlier, we look at fitness sometimes only as weight loss rather than looking at it as muscle gain. And that muscle gained, again, for those that don't know, sarcopenia is the loss of muscle mass over time due to aging. And so, how do you prevent that? By having your clients lift heavy enough weights to undergo that muscle building. And so, I compartmentalize fitness into two forms. I kind of said it earlier. You've got longevity and you've got performance.
Yeah.
And the difference between those two is going to be whether or not you're an athlete or you're just an everyday person. Like, I don't personally train athletes. I've had many athletes come to me who are like, "Hey man, you seem like you know what you're talking about. You're in good shape. I know you're a former athlete. Can you help me with XYZ?" And every single one of them, I'll say, if you're looking to get performance growth, if you're looking to be a better athlete, I recommend, and I'll have like 2 or 3 people in my local city that I know are really good at the performance side of things, who train professional athletes. I'll tell them, go to them if you're looking for an actual performance coach. What I deal with is longevity. I deal with you won't jump as high and your bench press won't be as good and you won't be as powerful as you otherwise could be, but we're compromising or sacrificing those gains for a more sustainable longevity. So I prioritize longevity as a form of fitness in terms of the everyday person, but
Yeah.
even then, that's only 20 to 30% of their overall healthy protocol. 70 to 80% of it is the food they eat. And when it comes to the fitness, I essentially work on their biomechanics. I work
Yeah.
on their posture, their walking mechanics, the integration of their posture and their walking mechanics with certain movements. So I have my clients do more sprinting than I have them doing like uh, steady state cardio. I'll have my clients do more stability training than I'll have them ever do with actual weight training. Because if they can control the time under tension through the endurance and the stability training, they essentially don't need to load their spine like they thought they had to under a prior way of thinking, which is the only way I can get strong is if I have a bunch of weight on me or if I'm throwing a bunch of weight around. And so I kind of approach it from more of a longevity standpoint rather than a performance standpoint. But it's
I
definitely
see.
crucial.
So
Saunas, all that.
and the book you wrote is called.
Healthy Made Easy. It's the nutrition side of things. Healthy
Okay.
Made Easy. This is going to be all nutritional implications
Are you going
on changing.
to redo the cover with a steak instead of an apple?
Yeah, 100%. See, you're too smart. That's how you know I wrote this before the carnivore.
Okay.
That's how you know I wrote it before the carnivore. And so, yeah, the idea is I have to go completely revamp it. So what I'm gonna do is I've already started writing. It's essentially an addendum, but it's just a part 2, and it's going to be healthy made easier, and it's going to have a steak on it, and it's going to be more of the keto carnivore approach rather than if the average person could just eat an apple a day to keep the doctor away, they'll be healthy, which is why I had an
Okay.
apple on front. 200 IQ. I like that you pointed that out, my man. You're the first one.
Okay. All right. So today we unfortunately we don't have more time, but I would have loved to continue this discussion. So we covered general topics through fitness, nutrition, healing. But if you guys want us to go deeper onto certain topics, don't hesitate to write anything you want us to go through in the comments. And we could make more of these talks with Mitchell. about fitness, about training, about lifestyle, and healing as well, because there are many sides of healing that we did not explore today, but which are still important, I think. So yeah. Well, thank you
Yeah,
very
let's
much.
schedule. Let's definitely schedule another time to go more in depth on things because I'm
Yeah.
curious as to your approach on like tensegrity, your approach on fascia. Like I'm genuinely curious as to those from just a personal trainer side as to
Uh-huh.
how you kind of approach those. But that's a conversation for another day.
All right. Thank you very much, Michelle, for being on the podcast today. I wish you a great day for the rest of today.
I appreciate it. Thank you
And
for having me again.
and thank you for everything you do when it comes to helping people. I think this is something that people don't necessarily see most of the time. The trainers who are really genuinely, sincerely committed to their clients are usually great people who really want to make a change and help, just help. And this notion of helping is something that we tend to lose. And of course, we get paid for it, but there's a way to do it. And I'm sure that if we would be paid less, or even sometime not, we would still do it because it's in the person.
It's invaluably fulfilling. It's invaluable helping
S-
another individual.
So I think thank you for your the documentary, the time you took to speak out of that experience you had, and it will inspire many people, I'm sure. And also the book that we will put on the description section. All right.
All right, brother. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks to you to be here. See you soon. Bye.